Welcome to Jury Duty, or welcome back to Jury Duty, hopefully. We want to kick off our expert interview segments, which we're affectionately calling our judgment calls, with an awesome guest. This is my magnanimous co-host, Lindsay. She's the wind beneath my wings. And joining us, as you can see, is Mr. Joshua Ritter. He is a former LA District Attorney. He is a legal analyst. He is a consultant. He's a criminal defense attorney, and now he is a podcaster. You can catch him online at Courtroom Confidential. I will link in the description below. Please, if you haven't already, go pay him a virtual visit. He has awesome guests and awesome coverage. Josh, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. As you were describing my professional kind of resume there, I was thinking, doesn't everybody kind of have podcast at the end of their intro nowadays? So
right.
So yes,
it's like a resume. You put it
exactly.
The most recent thing last, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you again for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
We have too. The Lord of Lofty Titles. As soon as I started talking, I was like, that's a lot. But that means you're very accomplished, and it means that you know what you're talking about and that you have the credibility to help us sort of untangle some of the legal questions we have in the Mamta Bhatt case, because that's what we are here to talk about. So we may be small, but we are mighty. This is a very important case, at least here in my local community. After some hijinks starting this podcast, this became sort of our flagship case. And it's become personal. It's become our baby. So we really hope that this will enrich the understanding that our small subscriber base has, but answer some questions that I think we're all wondering, especially that there have been some developments in this case recently that changed where it was going versus where it was from. Lindsay, do you have any questions or anything to interrupt me with and stop me from talking at this point?
Well, so just really quick, on a scale from 1 to Full Metal Jacket, how crazy has the true crime world been in the past couple weeks?
Is that for all of us?
That's for anybody.
What is going on? Right? It does seem as though everybody's decided to fit in all the craziness in the last few weeks of the year. We're supposed to get to Thanksgiving and then just coast to New Year's, right?
Yes.
Just everybody kind of unplugs, but instead everything seems to have just gone into hyperdrive.
Right?
People are trying to fill out their punch cards. It's like those last flexible spending dollars on your health insurance. You got to use them before you lose them. I feel like the crazy decided.
Yeah, no one's called bingo just yet, so they had to keep on pulling numbers.
Yeah, well, and I don't know. Maybe judges are like, I want this off my calendar next year. Like, let's just get this done. I don't want to look at this person's name anymore. You know what I mean? And then between the Sarah Boone and the Melody Ferris and, all of it, it's been wild.
It has been. It's funny, too, because we've been thinking about it for the podcast, kind of, we're thinking about doing maybe like a end of year wrap up and then kind of a looking forward to 2025. And instead of having the trouble of what do we talk about, it's kind of like, what do we cut out? Because there's so much to talk about of what's happened this year, and next year looks to even be crazier, if you can imagine.
I mean, the last 2 weeks alone, I'm on burnout just trying to keep up with the news cycle. And I know that you do a lot of panel work on other podcasts, and you've been a very busy man the last 2 weeks because there's no end in sight for breaking news developments.
No, there isn't. We were just talking about this before we started to record, that it's been one of those weeks where you look at your calendar and you go, oh, this is not bad. I can handle this. And then all of a sudden, all the news starts to break, and it's weird because there's news breaking over the weekend. Yeah. And then it's like, we want to hear about Jay-Z. We want to hear about the CEO shooting. We want to hear, it's just thing after thing. Yeah, it's been busy.
So busy. I wanted to see how you were hanging in there, because I know that you have been really in the weeds with all of it too, covering all the things, talking about it, guesting, and we just really appreciate your time.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and I'm happy to do it. And but yeah, it's kind of hard keeping all these spinning plates in motion because a lot of complicated cases, breaking cases, twists taking place in old cases. It's a good time to be in the true crime world.
It's a busy time for sure.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I'm just so happy that none of this is happening. At least not a lot of it's happening in Florida. You're getting a little reprieve because Florida's the hot spot, man. I don't know what's in the water down there, but as long as Florida doesn't fall off the map, we will always have true crime. Always.
True story.
Sorry.
True story.
It's true. And who would have thought here in Manassas we'd have this headline making case? And for those of you joining us who are not completely read in on the Mamta Bhatt case, I'll give you the too long didn't read. Mamta is a 28-year-old mom, brand new mom. I mean, baby turned 1 this year. Here from Manassas, Virginia. She immigrated here from Nepal. And on July 29th, 30th, if you're going to get real sassy with me, some of you will, she disappeared without a trace, virtually without a trace. Her husband has now been charged with murder, and that was a new development. And he will be on trial late in 2025. However, at this point, there's no known whereabouts for Mamta other than the last day that we know that she was seen or spoke to somebody, which would be July 29th. And right now, all we can do until September is speculate about what actually happened to her. And if you haven't watched our previous videos, it's about as deep a dive as one can make with the information that we have. Hopefully you'll go back and watch those. I will make sure one of those pops up there for you. But essentially, we're looking at another no body murder case. And he had not been charged with murder. He'd only been charged with a class 6 felony of concealment of a dead body. And originally, Josh, some of the questions that we were chewing on before this development happened last week was how are they going to have a criminal complaint that says he murdered his wife but only charge him with concealing a body? And how is that going to work? Can they charge him later? Is it a situation where if they charge him now and they swing and they miss, they can't read? Like, we had so many questions. And then suddenly the week before he was supposed to go on trial yesterday, they charged him with murder. And that just turned everything upside down. It was the result we were hoping for based on the evidence we have. But, you know, you've seen, as we were talking about before, at least observed no body cases, especially ones that have been in the media. As a criminal defense attorney, how would you defend him? What would the approach be? What might his lawyers be thinking now? Because we know this is a big monkey wrench from the plans they originally had.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of obvious tactic usually for a criminal defense attorney when you have a no body case is just to attack the idea of, you know, how in the world are you going to say my client killed someone when you can't even really prove someone's dead, right? Which is interesting that you point out the way that this case unfolded, because it sounds like they felt strongly that they had a dead person on their hands. This wasn't a missing person. This wasn't a, well, where will she pop up and how do we find her? This was they definitely believe she's dead. They believe he's involved at least in concealing the body or disposing of the body, but they had trouble maybe perhaps linking him to the actual way that she died. And did that have to do with an accident? Did that have to do with they felt like somebody else was involved? We'll never know until the trial actually plays itself out, or preliminary hearings, if we even have that. But
we have. They've been interesting.
If you're a defense attorney, you're going to say, listen, there's always, if you're trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, well, then, ladies and gentlemen, there's always a doubt about where is this person and how did they actually die? And how do you expect the government to prove that my client is responsible when they can't even tell you how she actually met her end? Now, will that actually carry the day? I don't know. The interesting thing about no body cases from a prosecutor's perspective is that, yes, there's that difficulty. Yes, you're always going to have some questions lingering in the jurors' minds as to how that person died. Usually, it's not as difficult as you might think, because if there's a tremendous loss of blood, we've seen some evidence of that in this case, you can usually convince people, hey, how it actually happened is not as important as it happened. But there's one really interesting part of a no body case from a prosecutor's perspective that they don't get in other cases. And that's because in trying to prove that this person isn't missing, You get to bring in a lot of evidence that you would not be allowed in a normal murder case, which is this person's habits, this person's normal life. You get to call all of their family members who wouldn't have any real relevance in a normal murder case and say, tell us about her and tell us, why would she never just take off? Why would she never go missing? Oh, she's a mother of a infant child. Tell us about that and why she would never abandon their child. So it's all of this kind of emotional character type, I'm putting that in quotes, evidence that jurors get to hear about that they otherwise wouldn't, because you're just trying to establish this person wouldn't just disappear for no reason.
Yeah. And I think it's true. It follows suit that most mothers don't leave their children voluntarily. Most. There's Susan Smiths of the world that
they would.
Would.
Well, and most of her content on social media sites were of her and her baby. And so she loved, I mean, obviously that, she wasn't going to leave the baby. But my question is so he got charged in August with the dead body or the concealment charges.
Yes.
He was supposed to start his trial yesterday, Monday, the 9th.
Because he invoked his speedy trial.
Right. These
interesting move, by the way, not to cut you off, but very
please cut us off.
Yeah.
Why is that a strategic move?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
So many, it's kind of like a pastime of defense attorneys to talk about threatening to do that, but never actually do it, because the one thing that the defense has control over is usually the clock. They're the ones who get to say whether or not they're asking for a continuance or they're asking to invoke their speedy trial. It's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but usually there's some pressure that can be put on the prosecution by doing that. If you say, I'm not going to take a bunch of time to look into this, I don't think you guys actually are ready, I don't think you've got all your ducks in a row, it may put pressure and it may make it more difficult for the prosecution. But when you're dealing with a case of this seriousness and magnitude, it's hard to play that kind of game of chicken with your client's life. So you don't usually see it happen. There is one very notable exception that you guys may remember. There was a gentleman by the name of Orenthal James Simpson, O.J. Simpson, who went on trial.
I know that one.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
And he waived, he did not waive, he invoked his speedy trial rights. So we don't remember this. It was 30 years ago. He was arrested and tried within a calendar year. And that's how quickly that case happened, because his defense felt they don't have their ducks in a row, especially when it came to the forensic and DNA evidence. I'm not saying that's what lost that case, but that is like one case that's a huge exception. Yeah. Usually when you're looking at a case dealing with murder, defense attorneys are so behind the 8 ball when it comes to the evidence that they want as much time as they can possibly get. So as just kind of an interesting aside, it seems like maybe they thought, if we push this to trial quickly, they might not get the evidence they need for the murder. And if he goes on trial for this, then that's game over when it comes to the murder, because they can't, there would be a double jeopardy.
Okay.
Yeah, there would be an argument built into that you've tried him and convicted him for something related to that crime, and that was your only shot at it.
Lindsay, mark it down on the chit sheet. We have a really weird habit of play calling some weird, strange things in cases. We're like, did we say that yesterday, or did the news just say that 5 minutes ago? And when we talked about this, that was my biggest curiosity: is if they swing and miss on a murder charge, or they don't charge him at all, can they charge him? Because it's a similar or related offense. And luckily, at the last second, they got their Hail Mary charges to file, but that was very confusing for us. Like, is the speedy trial a way to put pressure on the Commonwealth to bring a case, which, based on the evidence that they had already, I can't imagine why this attorney thought this was a good idea. The preliminary hearings were enlightening, very enlightening. And this is why I'm so curious about how to defend this man, because I have not decided he's guilty, but that's what the evidence tells me. And if we are average jurors, which is what we are, I got a jury summons in the mail when I was like, it just, it didn't make a lot of sense, the things that his attorney was attempting. And you were starting to follow the breadcrumbs. There's no evidence that she's just not frolicking off somewhere in the distance. You have no evidence that she has died. You have no evidence that the blood belongs to her or that it's human blood. He also tried to say that it could be blood from a nosebleed. There was a loss of life, like significant, impactful event that happened that they had to remove the whole tub in their bathroom. So I don't know where he was going with that, but it was not a survivable incident, whatever happened. And there happens to be a person that used to live in that house that used that bathroom that's missing. So, gee, I wonder. It would not have been hard. And I don't think it will be hard without having a body in this case to win. But that was the stance he took in the preliminary hearings. And then he went so far as to say that there's no way that we don't know that she's off frolicking somewhere when we know that the police updated her to a critical involuntary missing person because, like you said, investigators went back and started talking to her friends and family. What would her habits be? Would she leave without a phone? Would she leave her baby? And the concern grew in 72 hours, Lindsay, after she was reported missing, that they changed her to critical and suddenly they were on his trail. And within the month, he was arrested.
Yeah.
I don't know where he thought he was going to go with. The judge didn't like it either. She was like,
he was going to go to Nepal. That's where he was going to go. And
then they arrested him very quickly. Like, oh, no.
Yeah, I think that argument likely not going to carry the day with any judge, right? Probably more traction you might find with jurors because you're just then looking for one person who might kind of buy into conspiracy theories or this idea where they feel like if they don't have an answer to every question, then that alone is reasonable doubt. And, still it's a long shot, but usually in these nobody cases, that is argument number one made by the defense is, listen, part of proving murder is not just proving there's a dead person, but also how did that happen? And they can't provide you with either answer beyond a reasonable doubt. So how are you going to convict my client? Again, I don't know if that'll carry the day, but perhaps with one juror, enough to cause them to hesitate.
Yeah. I think they have enough circumstantial evidence. For example, one of the various items he bought at the serial killer starter pack Home Depot was a set of knives, and several are missing that they were never recovered. For the lengths that people go to try to cover their tracks, he didn't do a very good job. In some ways, it was obvious he was trying to do that because he would wear white gloves as he's disposing of things on camera, and he drove a Tesla that has internal cameras, external cameras. He disabled all of those mechanisms and sold the car the day the police said, "Can we search the car?" He said, "Sure." And then he got rid of it. But I don't understand how you can go to such great lengths not to leave your DNA or your fingerprints, but not understand that Google's going to tell on you, as are all the cameras that you've invited into your life to monitor everything that you do and everywhere that you go. So it doesn't seem, it defies logic for me.
Yeah. Well, criminals by and large are not winning Nobel Prizes, right? They're not the most clever of people. It sounds like this murder may have, or at least the cleanup of it may have been more spontaneous than it was planned. But I think you make an excellent point. At the end of the day, as smart as you may be and as diligent and trying to cover your track, there are so many ways to track what you do anymore and so many ways to kind of piece together. I mean, it amazes me how even in not even in hugely populated areas like Los Angeles, New York, whatever, even in smaller cities, there's a network of video cameras that seems to be tracking everyone's movement enough for them to piece together where did that person go in the hours following when they believe this murder took place. And if that's to somewhere like Home Depot or to some late night dumpster drops, that might be enough circumstantial evidence to carry the day for the prosecution.
So in the background of all this, Josh, would you be encouraging your client to make some sort of deal?
Like an Alford plea?
Like an Alford plea or something, because this is so bad.
Yeah.
By the way, he also decided that after waiving grand jury and invoking his speedy trial. Now that he's been charged with murder, he has waived that right. And he's waived his right to a speedy trial, and he was indicted on a direct indictment from the grand jury.
Well, one bargaining chip, and that's probably a really crude way to characterize it, is that he might know where her body is, right? And if that brings some closure to the family and some closure to the community, maybe that is something that he would be willing. I know I personally, when I was a prosecutor, dealt with situations where that was something that, if you're going to ask for any plea negotiation in this at all, it's got to include telling us what took place and where to look, because that's the only thing that you have of value. If he's not willing to give that up, I can't imagine prosecutors want to, there's much that they want to deal with is, as far as offering him a plea. And even if he is offered a plea, it's probably going to look at, if it's not life, the better part of his life in prison.
Right. Yeah. Because it's not like the death penalty would be something on the table, because in Virginia, we've abolished the death penalty a couple of years ago. So I don't know how much leverage that buys him. But.
Well, it is funny. Defendants, people looking at prison, sometimes they cannot, they can't stand the idea of what we call an indeterminate sentence, meaning, 25 to life, like the idea that they could spend life. But if you tell them your sentence is 40 years, they can at least have like a date certain to look forward to. There's some weird psychology in it. And that could be something that could be offered or negotiated. I don't know, but I'm sure that the prosecution is not even considering any of that if it doesn't include some details about what took place and where to look.
Yeah, I imagine that would be the case. How would that be, at least in your opinion, would that be something that they would do shortly before the trial, or would that be something that they'd be thinking about in the build up to that, or just depend on the case itself?
Talking about the plea negotiation aspect, it's happening now. I'm sure there's discussions. I'm sure there's been conversations. Now, it could just be that the prosecution doesn't want to entertain any of it, and they feel the guy's good for murder. It's first-degree murder. They feel like they've got enough to prove it, and his offer is life in prison. If he would like to accept that now and avoid a trial, he can go ahead and do that.
Right.
But those in a more general way, those conversations are being had from the very beginning sometimes, and it's kind of an ongoing conversation. But in a case like this, there's, we're not haggling over a few years here or there. It's basically life or something short of that.
Because Lindsay, I feel like the evidence is absolutely incompatible with life. It's consistent with a loss of life event. And the totality of the evidence that we've gone over, just the two of us, is so strong. It's on par with the Scott Peterson case. It's on par with the Brian Walsh case, the Jennifer Dulos case. There's so much of it.
Well, the piece that bothers me the most about this is the amount of dumpster visits, right, that he made. And it is, if all of our minds are going to the same place with the garbage bags and the gloves and putting things in dumpsters and stuff, like, there is, I can't even tell you where she is, other than she's potentially scattered.
And it's the sites that he was going to, for perspective. It's not like we have the county dump. It is huge. It might as well be its own city. He didn't go there. We're talking about drop boxes for clothing donations that are the size of mailbox drop-offs. Like, Josh, I did a drive. I went to the relevant locations in the case and took everyone along with me to show the driving between A to B, how long it would have taken. And when we were talking about, maybe this is terrifying. I don't know if it's just me that I should have gone into law enforcement. I've found the gas station that he went to that was where they picked up a critical piece of evidence that had blood that was from the bathroom in the home that he dumped there, because he was smart enough to buy lunch on his credit card at the gas station, because apparently it had a cafe. I don't know many cafes at gas stations, so it must have been great food that it stuck out to him that he went there. But that's also where her phone pings for the last time. On him, without his phone. So he's only got her phone
And the Tesla.
and the Tesla.
Yeah.
And I was able to figure out by matter of deduction the location and the exact, I mean, there's 24 gas stations with the same name in the area. Only one had a cafe and only one had a clothing donation bin out front. And I found it and I went to it and gave everybody sort of a look around on my phone camera. And I'm like, I'm going to leave now. I couldn't stand there anymore. The ick that I felt, it was ominous. I felt gross standing there. I'm like, I can't believe that he would. And the way I was parked, there's only one place to park in front of the donation bin. I'm like, the fact that I'm standing here right now is making my skin crawl because he stood here too and went to this bin 5 feet away from me. And I'm looking around like, could I have done this? If I had something in my hand right now that I didn't want anyone to find and I put it in this bin, would I look suspicious? Like, these things are going through my head while I'm standing there. I'm like, do criminals think that way? Or they're just like, oh, I'm going to put this here and drive away. I was having like a little mini meltdown just standing there contemplating all of the logistics, and I didn't even do anything wrong.
Yeah, I know. I first of all, you did give me a little bit of heebie-jeebies by just describing that. But
you can watch it if you want to.
Yeah, it is funny because I think about this too. Like, what is going through these people's heads in these moments when they're doing these, especially too. There's a case out of Texas just recently, Simpson, Doug
Suzanne
Simpson, where it's a very similar thing where his wife is missing and he was going to Home Depot and hiding and all that. But what he did just before starting to dispose of the body is drop his kid off at school. And it always blows my mind is how in the world can you go about the mundane errands of life as you're planning and doing all of this really, really horrible, awful stuff. And I don't know what kind of psychotic, trance they fall under or whatever it is that they're able to just kind of put one foot in front of the other, but they're obviously doing that and making mistakes all along the way that create this trail of crumbs for law enforcement and diligent podcasters like yourself to put together and piece together. As you were speaking to it, made me think of something else. I don't want to trivialize all the seriousness of all of this, but these types of cases are also fascinating from a prosecutor's perspective to put on and for jurors to hear, because it is so circumstantial and piecing together, what is a person doing at dumpsters at all these different locations that have no connection to each other, that are miles apart from each other in the middle of the night. And that it's an interesting argument to build rather than just, kind of your garden variety eyewitness sort of case.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because, allegedly when Mamta was murdered, in that time frame that they're saying that it happened, he's like Googling a chicken farm. And then her mom calls. Right after her mom calls her phone, he starts moving. He's calling the babysitter. He drops the baby off and he starts going all over town with garbage bags of whatever,
Lindsay, I feel so validated by Chief Lugo's press conference after they charged him when he said they believed July 29th into the 30th. And that's why I keep giving two different dates, because the timeline that we've pieced together is that her last contact with the outside world was about 8 p.m. on the 29th of July. And by 4 a.m. on the 30th, he's Googling the human brain. He's Googling chicken farms. He's Googling very suspicious things. And by 5 something in the morning, her mother has started calling for their daily talks. My theory was mom was the catalyst for him panic cleaning. It was not premeditated to happen at that time, but he obviously put premeditation into it based on the months of Googling and suspicious things he'd been doing up to that point. But my theory was in this very short, about 7-hour period, that's when it happened. And it's consistent with all of the things that we know. Her routine just suddenly stops and something happens and he snaps, and he didn't plan for that point in time for this to happen. And then when her mother starts to call, that's when his egg timer goes off. It's only going to be X number of times that she can call in a day, that she's not going to get upset, that she is not going to raise the alarm. And sure enough, 48 hours later, her coworkers are calling for a wellness check. I think that he instantly panicked knowing, oh, somebody's looking for her now. And I'm panicking because this was the outcome I was looking for, but I didn't think this was going to be today. Something in that 7-hour period. And that's what Chief Lugo said, that he believes in that 7-hour period. That's when it happened. I'm like, Lindsay, we can help.
I know. It's so like, it's fascinating but disturbing at the same time. And like, to have a jury of peers see a timeline like that, and kind of, we all have routines. We all have things we do every day. We have people in our lives that we either see, work with, speak to, and all of a sudden we evaporate into thin air, and it just, I don't see a way out of this for him. I just don't.
Yeah, that was such an interesting point, that he probably realized it's not just a matter of me cleaning this up. It's a matter of people are going to miss her. I can't do anything about that. I can't do anything about the people missing her. So I've got to get whatever I need to get done quickly. And to your point, Lindsay, we live in a world where not only are we being tracked everywhere, but people expect kind of immediate access out of us. If we don't answer a text or a phone call within sometimes less than an hour, people start to wonder. So when somebody stops existing, that is immediately felt, not only in their digital footprint, but just others in their inability to be in contact with them.
And you have people like me, if you don't respond to me in an hour, I'm like, are you mad at me? My
red flag is I give you 59 minutes.
I know. But like, seriously, like, people want to know, they want access to you all the time. Even if you're like, I'm busy, or I'm doing this or whatever, people are like, have these touch points with others.
Well, it's a sense of entitlement, right? Because now that we have this type of technology where we can be at everyone's fingertips all the time, when you draw that boundary, I'm someone that draws boundaries. I'm like, if you call me before 9 o'clock in the morning, good luck. I don't recommend it. I've told you I'm not a pleasant human before 9 a.m., especially if I'm not caffeinated. If you choose to do that, that's on you. But that's a boundary. I'm telling you, please don't call me before 9 o'clock in the morning. I won't answer you. And if I do, it won't be pleasant. And I am not going to take any accountability for that. I'm just going to blame the lack of caffeine and sleep. I'm not a morning person. But it goes kind of hand in hand with those habits that people have, right? You know someone well enough to know, I wouldn't dodge your calls, Lindsay, for 2 straight days. You'd get on a plane and be like, where the hell are you? Answer my phone call. Like, you would immediately be like, something's not right. That's why I don't think that while this was premeditated, because I think we have enough build up and exposition evidence wise to show this was not a foreign thought to him. It just was not the moment he planned to happen. There's so much that just, you can't answer it any other way. She had no friends and family here for very long. She only lived here since 2021. She was an immigrant. She was about to get her green card, and she missed that appointment in the period of time that she was missing. And there's just too much, that there's no one with motive here to harm her. She didn't have a support system that was very large. She didn't have any enemies. She didn't drive. So if she wasn't at work, she was at home. It's not like she had a lot of opportunity to make an enemy of anyone that would want to hurt her. The only person that seems to have a motive here is her husband. And that's on its face without looking at anything else. And that's where you look first, right? Inside the house, inside the nuclear family unit, right?
So, Josh, my question is, if you're defending this dude,
we're not even naming him anymore. We're calling him this dude.
Yeah, he doesn't even deserve a name.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. What kind of juror are you looking for?
That's a great question. Well, what you don't want are kind of common sense folks, right? You don't want, right.
You don't connect the dots.
I think you want kind of conspiracy theory type people, people that are probably going to believe that fringe, well, what if sort of a scenario. The people that the prosecutor wants are the people who can kind of see the big picture from a 30,000 foot view immediately. Like, oh, I get it. Like that makes sense to me. No, she would never just disappear. As the defense, you want that one person who goes, but would she? But maybe she could. Well, that doesn't mean that she didn't. Well, stranger things have happened. I heard about this one time when a lady just took off because she was having an affair and you never heard from her again. I think that's what you're looking for. Now, those types of people are few and far between sometimes. But they need one. They just need one.
We're a stone's throw from DC, so there's plenty of those people here.
Yeah. Well, my thought is like maybe a few from like an older generation that maybe doesn't understand technology as much as a youngster. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know though. I feel like if I were, and I hate to keep on putting myself in the position of defending him, but if I were, I feel like an older person might have the life experience to not buy into the idea of somebody just dropping off the map. They'd be like, no, there's got to be a reason behind that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a difficult case for the defense any way you look at it, but I think you want a contrarian, a person who's not going to go along with the rest of the folks, and a person who probably, has a tinfoil hat at home and will buy into kind of some crazy ideas now and then.
Something, and it's levity, but this is what I pictured too when we go back to the whole like Home Depot cleanup, this following this roadmap and this formula. I'm thinking about jury makeup, and I'm like, would I want more men on this jury, more women on this jury? I feel like it doesn't really matter either way. But I feel like the relatability, who do you relate to more in this case? If you relate more to Mamta, you might be more sympathetic to her as a victim. If you relate more to Naresh, maybe you'd be more inclined to hear more of the case before making up your mind. I read some statistics with one of the jurors. We interviewed Tom Evans from the Lori Vallow trial, and I asked him, I said, where did you make up your mind along the way before you hit deliberations? And he was an alternate, but before everything was shut down and it was time to make choices, where was your mind made up? Because statistically, people with more life experience, I don't want to say older people because we're part of that group now. We're in that group now. Yeah. We're old enough. I'm 29. I'll die on that hill. I'm also 100 pounds. I'll die on that hill too. About 50% of the way through a case, people with more life experience are more likely to have developed an opinion that's very hard to shake them unless something's coming, like the October surprise of this case is coming in the other half. But younger people with less life experience or maybe less education take about 80% of the trial time to go, okay, I think I've made up my mind. And I think it was a disparate number of men to women too. And all I'm thinking is, one of the things that gets these people caught is their terrible cleanup job. And you know why? It's because they're all men, Lindsay. They're going to Home Depot buying cleaning supplies they've never used before. They don't know how to use them. They exhaust them. They got to go back for more because their wife probably did all of that and knew how, can you imagine this hapless guy walking through Home Depot like, I have to go clean up a murder scene. I can't call my wife right now and ask her which aisle the Clorox wipes are in because this is what's going through my mind to bring some levity to it. Like that's needed. But I'm also thinking, wow, if I was a male juror on this case, I'd be like, maybe he just really got a great deal on Clorox wipes. I don't know, but there has to be a difference, I think, not just age, but maybe the gender for this jury, because there's a lot of patriarchal sort of normative behaviors that are associated here. It was an arranged marriage from a third. There's, I think, some cultural significance here that maybe jurors will understand. It's like getting one juror that's both male and maybe an immigrant or was born in a country with a really patriarchal system of, caste that would go, well, I don't know, I relate to this guy. And that's what makes me nervous.
Yeah, that's an interesting
that was a kind long of nuanced
aspect. Well, that's an interesting aspect about it too, is it's not just like you try to break it down by age or sex, but also there's this very distinct cultural element to the whole thing, right? That maybe if you're the prosecution or defense, do you want people understanding that, or does that matter to you that people understand that aspect of it? I'll be honest with you, just thinking about it from the male-female perspective, I could see men looking at it and being more upset with him. Like, how dare this guy? You know what I mean? Like, as a man, I'm insulted by his behavior. I mean, sometimes you'll see that kind of counterintuitive response to things. I mean, we see that in kind of sexual assault cases sometimes too, that the men are more angry at the behavior of the man in a case because they want to make it kind of almost declarative that I don't approve of this behavior in any kind of way. And they might view this case similarly.
Right.
And don't those convicts typically get treated a little more roughly in the system when people think, oh, your targets are women and children? There's even prison hierarchy where it's like, oh, no, we don't do that.
Yeah, we don't do that here.
We don't do that here.
Yeah.
Okay, a small percentage of people do, but
yeah. Well, and also Naresh is his name. He has
that guy.
He has spoken to police. He's spoken to, media. All of a sudden he wants an interpreter.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I've seen that before too, where you have people who are using the services of an interpreter and they're fluent in understanding everything that's going on.
Yeah. He worked in the White House.
I don't know if it's a crutch sort of a thing and they're just going to take advantage of any resource that's handed to them, or if it's kind of perhaps a ploy at sympathy that I'm kind of a immigrant caught up in this system and I don't know what you guys are trying to do to me, and I'm too confused to really I don't know. But that I'm not surprised to hear that at all.
Really?
Yeah. Would an perceived issue, we'll put air quotes around that, an alleged issue with the quality of or services of an interpreter play into a possible appeal if he were convicted? Like, how can you even prove that?
Yeah, that's my first question is, these interpreters are usually, I mean, I'm sure that it works the same way in Virginia as it does here. They have to be kind of court qualified. But their interpretation is not transcribed anywhere. And so, in other words, what's transcribed in court is whatever's spoken in English. Then that interpreter speaks it to him. And if he has to respond, first of all, whatever the interpreter says to him is not transcribed. And then if he ever has to speak, it's just the English translation that is ever transcribed. So even if an appellate court wanted to review some sort of mistake taking place between the what was spoken in English and the interpretation being made, they wouldn't know what it is. And there's been situations I've experienced in court where a Spanish language interpreter might be interpreting and a Spanish language speaking defense attorney has barked up and said, this is what they're saying is not right. I want this proceeding to take a halt because this is not being translated properly, or sometimes there's nuance in the way something is said. Yeah. I know I'm getting a little bit into the weeds here, but I don't think
as far in as you want.
Yeah, that's where
from an appellate perspective, I don't think there would be anything to review. It's just kind of that's the record is what the record is.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I think I have a pretty solid understanding of what this poor public defender is up against, but other than right. This is like an extremely long question, but I think it will make sense in thinking about what the Commonwealth of Virginia is going to struggle with. And I say other than not having a body, but kind of with an asterisk. What might their guardrails be? Is the no body concept really that much of a guardrail? As an attorney, you are one of the few people qualified to have a unique opinion on this, but I know that the pool of no body cases is significantly smaller than convictions where there is a body. But I hear lawyers all over podcasts, the internet, the news lately talking about these no body cases and sort of lamenting like, oh, it's going to be a challenge. There's no body. But here's what confuses me about that is I see that as more of an advantage in a case like this. Is it really that much of an uphill battle? If you have an adequate investigative team and resources who are adapting their methodologies, their technology to be equipped for this possibility, it's really not that much different. And the challenges won't persist as much as they used to without maybe digital forensics, advances in DNA testing. Those advantages should put investigative possibilities on par with a body case. And it sounds like sort of an antiquated or confirmation bias way of saying, well, no body, no proof, or no body, this is a challenge, sort of stunts the mindset of people that don't see it as a challenge. Maybe it's because attorneys who've experienced this see that it's been challenging in the past, but is that sort of a confirmation bias that because it was challenging before that it should be challenging now? If you don't have a body, you can't have someone argue with you about cause and manner of death and have someone say, okay, well, here's a dead body. It could have been blunt force or they could have tripped and fell. I feel like that would make it harder in some cases. This seems almost too simple to solve if you're using your common sense. Is having no body really still that much of a challenge, or is that going to depend on the case from either side of it?
No, I think that's a great question because it does expose that it's kind of an oversimplistic view to say that a no body case is more difficult for the prosecution. And I totally agree with you that in some respects it can be not easier, but maybe give you a stronger argument to the jurors that the person that is accused, the defendant, intended to have it happen because of look at all of the steps, the consciousness of guilt that they took place afterwards. If this were, imagine this case very differently, where he immediately calls the police and says, my wife fell, or my wife killed herself, or my wife, whatever happened, right?
Yeah.
And the body's laying right there. Now it comes down to how do we prove he did it? How do we prove it wasn't an accident? How do we prove that she didn't take her life, or whatever it is that he immediately says? And there you've got the body laying right there. So it's not just the mere fact of having the body makes it an easier case for the prosecution. In this case, all of the cleanup and cover up and consciousness of guilt stuff, I think it makes it far stronger to them than that other hypothetical I'm presenting. So yes, I agree with you. I think the reason why you hear that quite often is that, the prosecution has to prove everything, including cause of death and including that wasn't an accident. And so when you've got no autopsy to present and you've got still this lingering idea that this person may still exist somewhere, I think that is kind of the go-to gut reaction that people have about no body cases. Now, if you're talking about a cold case that's a no body case or something, then you're talking a very, very different and very, very difficult. But in a situation like this, I agree with you. It's a tremendously strong case, and that has nothing to do with whether or not they can locate her body.
Josh, I have a no body cold case that's heating up that's very personal to me that's happening simultaneously right now that I might have to pick your brain about another time.
Please.
Sorry, that was a random segue. But as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, that could be fun.
Well, we don't want to keep Josh any longer because he probably has like 6 other podcasts to record after us.
I probably got little ones yelling at me right now more than anything.
Yeah, well, I totally understand that sentiment as well. But we are so excited to potentially call you a friend now.
Oh, absolutely.
Can we add that to the resume, friend?
Absolutely.
Nice. Very cool. Well, hey, we appreciate you so much, Josh. We really are grateful for your time and enjoy chatting with you. Justice for Mamta. Hopefully, we can have you on when things start heating up again to ask more questions. And we just enjoy having you. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for having me. I enjoyed this and I look forward to it. Please call me again.
We will. We will.
Oh, yeah, we will. We need more judgment calls. Yeah. I'm going to put a sound or a graphic there. We're going to make that stick. But please don't forget to check out Josh's channel, Courtroom Confidential. It will be linked in the description below.
Make good choices. And if you don't put them on the internet.
Or we might talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Start over.
We're so stupid.
So extra.
We have no business being on the internet.